Hello, everybody, and welcome to this special edition of our series of video on the state of the economy and the impact of COVID-19. Today, it's a special edition. We have a guest with us, well-known infectious disease specialist, Dr. Carl Weiss, who is chief of the division at the Jewish General Hospital in Montreal. Hello, Dr. Weiss.
Yes, how are you today?
Very good. Thanks for being with us.
My pleasure.
Let's start with an overall status of the situation in Canada. Quebec seems to be doing a little better. It's more difficult in Ontario. What is your assessment of the overall situation in Canada?
Overall in the country, I would say it's pretty stable. The Maritimes are doing very well. Quebec is not doing badly. I think it's holding steady, and the number of cases are very stable. So steady, I would say. Ontario is doing very badly, but I think the worst is behind us, and now we're like at a plateau or maybe at the beginning of a descent here. There is also Alberta, which is not doing that great, but hopefully they'll do better. The other western provinces are pretty stable too. So the overall situation, apart from Ontario and a little bit from Alberta, is relatively good.
We're getting a lot of questions about vaccines. So you've told us in the past a bit of your opinion on this. Where does it stand today, especially with the case of England that's doing really well with massive AstraZeneca vaccination? So what's your assessment of the different types of vaccines we have available?
Okay, so we have two types of vaccines available in Canada. We have what we call the mRNA vaccine, Pfizer and Moderna. Practically speaking, in terms of safety, they have been given to over 500 million people around the world. Very safe and very effective. Israel is the best case example where they use the Pfizer vaccination for 90% of their population and they're basically out of the pandemic. In terms, for example, of pregnant women, we know that mRNA vaccine seems to be favored because there is more and more data that A, we should immunize pregnant women, and B, the vaccine that should be used in this category of patient is mostly the mRNA vaccine, so Pfizer or Moderna. The AstraZeneca vaccine is a good vaccine if you're over 60, no doubt about it. It protects you against severe disease, severe complications. We can argue between 55 and 60. That's more semantic than anything else. But the younger you are, the higher risk of thrombosis. And although the risk is really, really small, 1 in 100,000, it's still there. And unfortunately, we saw like a case of death in Quebec recently. So we have to be, careful in the younger population with all the AstraZeneca vaccine story. But still a good vaccine over 60, no doubt about it. And then there is the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, which is going to be on the market pretty soon. And relatively good so far, but we still need more data on this one.
Excellent. Let's talk about the whole concept of a third dose. Will it be required, and for which vaccines? And what about annual booster shots being required?
So the story is, if we don't get rid of COVID on a worldwide scale, and until we don't get rid of the virus on a worldwide scale, we will have no choice to potentially administer a third dose next year or the year after to have a long-term protection. And I think the story of the third dose, it's a little bit like the flu vaccine that we have to give every year. So until COVID-19 is completely eliminated from the face of the earth, or barely surviving in some very remote spots, we might have to give third doses and potentially even fourth doses to people in the next 2-3 years.
Another question that we received is the concept of getting a different vaccine the second time around. What is your opinion on this? Is it something to avoid? Is it better? Should we mix and match them? What is the science saying?
So the message behind this is very simple. For the moment, we should get the same vaccine the second time as we did the first time. So we should try to have the same vaccine both times. If we cannot have the same vaccine for supply reasons mostly, I would say that we should stick to the same group of vaccine. So if you had the Moderna vaccine the first time, you should probably get a Pfizer vaccine the second time, and vice versa. So we should try avoiding going to another type of vaccine. Now, there is one group of people who had the AstraZeneca vaccine the first time, and we're talking about the younger women, for example, people under the age of 45, 65, mostly women, if they had the AstraZeneca the first time. And because of a potential risk associated with the vaccine, there are questions about giving a different type of vaccine to these people. So, but in general, the message you have to take home is stick to the same vaccine.
Excellent. Another topic that's in the public debate is the question of a passport. What is your opinion on some kind of passport related to the vaccination?
So we will have no, I would say, choice but to have a passport. One of the reasons it's because other countries will impose a passport to get in. So if we want to travel, if for work or for leisure, we will probably need a passport at one time because countries will impose it. That's the number one thing. The number two thing, in terms of the economy, I think the experiment in Israel about a green pass, where people who got 2 doses were able to go everywhere, and showed that if you have this type of structure implemented, then you will be able to reopen restaurants and concert halls and businesses and museums and everything and have a normal life. And therefore, this will have an impact, social impact in a positive way, an economic impact. So we will eventually go to a kind of a world-wide passport on who got their shots. And by the way, historically, it happened in the past. In the past, countries in the 70s, for example, wanted people to have a proof of immunization against smallpox or cholera when we had outbreaks of cholera. So it's not something new.
No, yellow fever also is a good example. What about variants? We hear a lot about them. We're especially worried about the Indian variant that seems to be problematic. Can you tell us your opinion on this? And another question is, are the vaccines protecting us against those variants so far?
So number one, variants are something natural for the virus. It's just a way for the virus to adapt itself better to the human species, and it's normal and expected to have variants. Two, the vast majority of variants we have now in Canada overtook the wild strain, the ancient strain, so we have more variants than in this country. Three, yes, vaccines are still good against variants, maybe a little bit less against the South African variants, but I think the ones we have right now, are still working. Four, probably companies in the future will adjust their vaccines according to the most prevalent variants, circulating around. So there will be potential adjustment to vaccine for our future booster doses. And five, I have to say that variants in general, as you can see, are emerging from countries where we have a large population, we have socioeconomic problems, you have overcrowding in certain situations. So this is why we have a Brazilian, the South African, the Indian variant. So these are countries where we can see the emergence of other potential variants in the future.
Actually, on that point, there is a theory that we could see different variants keep popping up in the coming years, and that will delay a return to the normal. So it's a theory that seems to be gaining popularity. You think there's a good probability of this happening?
Yes, and that's why we have a race between vaccines and variants. The faster we immunize the world, the less problematic the variants will be.
China seems to be a bit of a question mark. They say that everything's under control, no more cases. Anecdotally, that's not what we're hearing. We have a bank in Cambodia, and there's been some cases. So does the medical field know anything about China?
Not really. I think we don't know more than you do, because I think, we rely on whatever comes out of China, whatever has been published. And so far, not much has been published recently from China.
Okay, let's talk about reopening of the economies, and we have different examples. I'd like to hear you on, we talked a little bit about Israel, but England, where you can go to pubs. The airport in Atlanta is at 80% of its capacity. And the most striking one to us was the rugby matches in Australia with 80,000 people in attendance, while only 5% of their population is vaccinated. What's going on, Dr. Weiss?
So Australia is a special case because it's an island and they have restricted traveling in a very massive way. So it's a different story. But for the others, it's simply the success of vaccinating the vast majority of the population. So Israel is the best example. The United Kingdom is probably the second one. But the United States is also like very close to the UK. The Americans are giving 3.5, 4 million doses per day. They have reopened their economy at a very fast pace. The number of cases in the US is really going down. It's plummeting. So you can see that all of this tells you that a successful immunization campaign will probably bring back a more normal life.
Well, talking about a more normal life, a lot of questions about back to work initiatives. We've gone back and forth on a couple of occasions so far with different waves. So far, what seems to be most likely is a return to the office somewhere in the fall. Do you think that's the most likely outcome?
Yeah, it's a reasonable outcome if we are able to immunize at least 75% of the Canadian population and a significant number with 2 doses. And I think if we reach that level, we'll certainly be able to go back to work, in a real physical way, the way we did before. However, I have to say, and what could be a positive things of COVID, the world also has changed in terms of telemedicine and telework, that we can do things remotely today that we couldn't do before. So for all kinds of reasons, it's a possibility that the future will be a mix of, work in presence, but also telework in the future. But certainly that in the fall 2021, I would say a more significant part of the workforce should be back to work in an old-fashioned way.
Many of our clients and listeners are avid travelers, and we all saw that the European Union said that American tourists that have been vaccinated will be able to visit Europe this summer. So, what is your advice to our clients who are thinking of, sipping wine in Paris in July?
So first of all, the situation in Europe is not that great. So people have to be careful and aware of this. Second of all, I think unless it's really important and it's really essential, I think we should not encourage travel at this time, because if the situation is getting better in Canada, we have to make sure we are not going to import different variants. So I don't think that 2021 will be a great year for Canadians to travel abroad, except maybe to the United States, where the situation is improving significantly. It's close to for us, and we have a better knowledge and control on what's going on. But I mean, to start traveling around the world, unless it's really necessary, is probably not a great idea in 2021.
So another summer in our home country. Last question for you, Dr. Weiss. Last year, you told us about a return to full normalcy in 2024, which was a bit of a shock for some of us. Is this still the same scenario?
When I was talking about 2024, it was really returning back to what was a pre-COVID life around the world, meaning traveling with no restriction, not having a passport with like an immunization passport, going wherever you want, whenever you want, with no limitation, going to sports event, concert halls, restaurants, etc. So if you look at what's going on around the world, until we tame the entire pandemic on a worldwide scale, including relatively poor countries, we will still have, I would say, hot fires burning here and there. And I will stick with my prediction that, returning to a pre-COVID-19 world is probably not going to happen before 2024. We're already like in 2021. Remember, it's 19 and we're already in 2021.
Well, excellent. You've been very helpful and very right so far. So thank you very much for your insights, Dr. Weiss.
My pleasure.
Thank you for listening to this update. Again, to all of our viewers and clients out there of the large national bank group, thank you. We will be back in 2 weeks with our chief economist, Stéphane Marion. Thank you.